we've been having some trouble with the windscreen wiper motors, so driving something like this through the winter, well, that's an absolute nightmare. So what we're going to do now is put the windscreen wiper motor out. It's a Lucas DR2, strip it down, see if we can rebuild it. Okay, so let's just go and have a look at the wiper motor itself and see how we get it out. So this is the wiper motor. It's a Lucas DR2 motor, but fundamentally it's the same as all the Lucas wiper motors fitted to the 1950s and the 1960s. Well, although the wiper motor is up here in the engine bay, it's actually bolted through under the wheel arch, so I've got to dive under here to take it off. Now the first thing I'm going to do to the motor itself is disconnect the wires. There are 3 wires on this one, and you've got to be careful that you don't get them mixed up, because the wiring on a wiper motor is a bit tricky, because it's got 2 circuits. It's got the main switched circuit, and there's also a park circuit. So when you switch the wiper off, the blades return to the bottom. So if you get the wires confused, it can mess it all up in all sorts of ways. Now the next thing I'm going to do is this nut here, which is what actually connects the drive mechanism inside the motor. And now the final thing before I take it out, I've got to actually disconnect the gearbox cover. But this piece here is the park mechanism sensor, so that actually will swivel once I've undone it, so you've got to kind of keep a mental note roughly whereabouts that is. There's a tiny circuit, and then this drive rod should, there we are, so that lifts out. You see it's got a little pin in it there that engages in the drive cable for the wipers themselves. I'll actually lift that back in place because I don't want it falling all over the place. I might even pop one of the screws back in just to sort of hold it in place. Just disconnect the earth. Now that should come away now. There we are. That's ease that off. So you see this drive cable stays in place and this comes away. Right, so I'll just plonk the old motor on the bench here and whip it open and have a look inside. Now to get inside, it's these 2 screws on the end here. Again, you want a nice clean space, make sure you don't lose any bits and pieces. I probably said before, this is a DR2 motor, but all of these Lucas square-bodied motors are very similar inside. I can see why that's not working straight away. I don't know if you can see there's a lot of copper dust inside there, and I can see straight away that what we've got is the commutator on the actual motor. That's the thing that picks up the power from these brushes here. Have actually been ground. In fact, the brushes have worn away to nothing, and the brush holders have actually cut the commutator completely away. So that's obviously why. Again, you can see where that copper's gone. That should be copper all the way through. And again, I don't know if you can see these metal holders here. They actually hold the brushes, and the brushes, the carbon brushes, have gone right down to nothing. So it's going to need a new armature with the commutator, as well as new brushes to get this motor going. Now you saw for this old wiper motor, the armature commutator was completely knackered, so I've been lucky enough to order some new old parts. So here I've got a set of brushes in this fantastic old Lucas box from the 1950s, and here a new old stock armature and commutator, and you can see here the copper on the commutator is intact and clean, so that should work absolutely fine. But also, I mean, I must say, the insides of these old electric motors, all these copper windings, I do really like it. It's kind of real primitive electric stuff. It's kind of like Michael Faraday stuff, kind of electromagnetics. It's beautiful, beautiful. Right, so that's the brushes, and you can see that brush has completely worn down to nothing. Just whack a bit of grease into the bearing and gearbox holder. Grease up the spindle. Off. Don't want it too greasy, but a little spray around inside. You can see there's the new brushes in their holders, and there's this little spring that connects them together in these little spring pieces that slide through the holders. So you can see how it goes by looking at the old one before you take it apart. Put that spring on and then open those apart. It's a little bit fiddly, this bit. I will just try and show you. Can you see there how those brush holders have got the pin at the base there, just there, and it rests on that, and the spring between the two holds them in place. And now what I've got to do is carefully get the body back over the armature commutator without breaking that little rubber, and then I've got to open brush holders apart, that's it, and gently ease that over without breaking anything. And as you can see, that the brushes at each side of the commutator now is pushed fully home into its housing, so that all looks absolutely correct. So I'll just again check there's enough grease end bearing, not too much but enough. Pop the end cap back on, make sure it locates properly, that's it. You can feel the bearing going on, and then slide this through. That's one, and that's the other one. So the next stage is to get it all fitted back to the car and see if it works okay. Now I'm not going to pretend that this is a full overhaul. There's various bearings and bits and pieces inside the motor that I haven't changed. What I've done here really is a cheap and easy repair, which is going to get this motor back working again, and because the parts are new old stock, they should be very good. Now if the commutator here, this part here, is not worn through, if it's copper all the way around, you can actually get your motor back to life just by cleaning those surfaces, making sure that those gaps between the segments are clear, and putting a pair of the new brushes in. Here's the old brushes here, and you can get a set of new brushes for like 4 or 5 quid. So, you know, for under a tenner, you can actually get your old wiper motor back going again. And the cost of a new wiper motor is, well, it's an awful lot of money these days, so it's certainly worth being able to do it. But even the new armature was only 30 quid, so 35 quid, and my motor is now hopefully ready to go. Offering it up. First thing I've got to do is get the drive cable back engaged with the gearbox, which is a little bit fiddly. That's this little piece here. And basically the head of the bolt, there we are, you can see that locates in a slot at the end there and holds the nut securely. Once that's on, I can actually get the mounting bolts through their holes with an earth strap that goes around the bottom one. Double fiddly. It should. There we are. It's lining up. Now the next thing is this little connecting rod that actually drives the wipers backwards and forwards. And look at that, absolutely perfect. There's a little washer. There we are, so that pops on the end there. And there is a circlip. There we are, I'll show you that. Little C-clip, there it is. And that needs to go on the end of the shaft. And these are buggers, make sure it doesn't disappear into the night, or else you'll never find it again. There we are, so that's located properly. There we are. Remember now, that's actually in the same place it was. I can tell because there's actually a terminal inside there, and that's touching the head of that bolt. And that's what gives me the park position on the wipers. So I'll get those nuts in there, just tighten them up. So that's the gearbox cover done. Just going to tighten up this union here. Yep, that's tight enough. Now, time for the terminals. The thing to remember is make sure they go back the same way that they came off. Right, so that's all the terminals connected. All I need to do now is go back under the wing and attach the bolts that hold this in. As you can see, it is a little bit fiddly on this car, but obviously you won't be doing it on a Wolseley 690, and the bolts will be in a different place. So that's done. Well, here's the motor all put back together and put back in place, and as I said, I wouldn't call it properly rebuilt as such. I haven't replaced the bearings or anything like that. I've checked and they seem fine, but what I have done is a fairly quick and cheap repair, and you can really see there was nothing there that anyone couldn't be able to do. So if your wiper motor breaks, you don't have to buy a new one. You might get away with just changing the brushes, or even if you need a new commutator, well, this has cost me less than 40 quid, and fingers crossed my wipers will be working again, so that's bonus. That is absolutely fantastic, and all in all it's taken just over 2 hours non-stop to put the plan together, and really not an awful lot of money, and you've seen there, nothing too complicated, and I've got my wipers back, so that's absolutely fantastic.